I was fortunate to have the opportunity to play the SimCity beta. SimCity is one of my favorite game franchises, and it's been 10 years since SimCity 4, the last game in the series. That's way too long, guys. A lot of things have changed in that wait time, and fortunately, Maxis has taken advantage of a lot of these changes and incorporated them into the game, which will hopefully made it worth the wait. The beta had a lot of restrictions. There were a lot of things you couldn't build, and quite a few features like multi-city play that were disabled. The biggest restriction was the time limit. You only got an hour to build a city, although you could play for 1 hour as many times as you wanted. I don't say this as a complaint, it's more of a disclaimer. These restrictions made it difficult to get a well-rounded impression of SimCity, although I was able to experience the core basics of gameplay and see the game's new Glassbox engine at work. This SimCity is the most organic feeling entry in the series. There are lots of nice little details in the game if you slow down and zoom in on the action. The cities you make feel much more alive and lived in. That's actually fairly important for this kind of game, since so much of the fun comes from enjoying your creations. The extra detail really helps you feel like you're the omnipotent mayor of a living, breathing city. Unlike the older games, each citizen's life is simulated. If you want, you can follow Sims around as they go about their daily routines. This means that traffic is now generated dynamically, rather than by abstract simulation rules you can't see. That kind of experience is present all over the game. You can get lots of cues about what's going on in your city by just looking at it. But sometimes you'll need more data. Instead of charts and graphs like in the old days, SimCity now has some really useful and aesthetically pleasing graphical overlays to give you info about your city. The biggest gameplay changes to SimCity are roads and zoning. Zones can only be placed along roads now, and road capacity affects zone density. Cheap, low-capacity dirt roads, for example, won't be able to support skyscrapers. This change makes planning your roads a lot more important and strategic. Roads also carry power, water, and sewage beneath them, thankfully eliminating the tedious busywork of placing pipes and power lines. In my experience, it seemed like zones usually began with lower density, lower wealth buildings, and over time, the buildings were replaced with higher density and higher wealth properties, if conditions were right. The older games did this to a degree, but because you could choose zone density in the old games, you didn't get the feeling of progression that this gives you. It actually feels like your city is developing over time, building itself up. In the old games, I felt like I was constantly extending my city, building outward. My impression is that this SimCity is less about building outward and more about developing what you have. It's about figuring out how to make things better, more efficient, and more specialized. And that's much more like what real cities go through. One other feature omitted from the beta is disasters. There was a menu for it, but I couldn't start any. However, I did discover a new disaster type that I didn't know about: zombies. That's right. Zombies truly are in every game now. They appeared in 2 different cities that I built. At first I wasn't sure if it was just a disaster or a fun Easter egg, but sure enough, I found that zombies did actually cause damage and spread infection. It's a pretty fun disaster type, and a nice inclusion, although I'm not sure how you're supposed to fight it yet. Before I conclude, there are a couple of big issues I feel like I have to address. Many are concerned that the default city size, which is the only city size, isn't big enough. I agree, it isn't. Perhaps there are legitimate gameplay reasons for this, or maybe it's just a technical limitation. I'm not sure. The bottom line is that it limits creative freedom, and forces those of us who dreamed of growing large, sprawling cities to make everything compact. I think there are ways around this problem, and I'm hoping that the smart bunch of people at Maxis figure out a solution that will allow for more room. The other big issue that's been raised is the always online requirement of the game. Is this requirement for the gameplay, or is it a DRM measure? Well, it's both. The online features like region play and a world economy sound exciting and compelling, but Maxis has claimed that the game needs to be connected constantly, not just because of these features, but because some of the processing is done in the cloud. Apparently, that's just how the Glassbox engine works. I don't like that precedent for one very good reason. I don't trust the cloud. People are worried, understandably so, about having another Diablo 3 Error 37 problem. If EA servers go down, we want to be able to play the game we bought. That's all I want to know. If the servers go down, can I play it? If EA stops supporting this game in the future, will I still be able to play locally? Right now, it kind of sounds like the answer is no. This game could potentially be shut down in the future, just like MMO games are. For some people, that's a really good reason not to buy the game, and I fully understand that. It is unfortunate that these issues exist with this game, and I wish that they didn't. For me, I'm a big enough SimCity fan that I'm willing to take the chance. But it wouldn't entirely surprise me if we got burned at some point in the future. People often say that EA buys game developers and ruins them. I would contend that Maxis is one EA-owned studio that's never been ruined. When I played the SimCity beta, it seemed evident that the team has created this game with a lot of care, love, and personality. I can't wait to play the full game.